What's your name?
My name's Jess Burke, and I'm with the Central Tablelands Local Land Services.
Central Tablelands Local Land Services. And how did you find the course today?
It was a really great introduction to working around aircraft. I'd been up in a chopper as a passenger before, but I always had someone really instructing me and telling me what to do, and I just sat there. So this course showed me a lot more about how helicopters are navigated and the different coordinates that you can use to communicate with the chopper and to people on the ground.
Do you feel more comfortable around aircraft now?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
No worries.
Hi Fortress Learning Team, thanks for your patience with my evidence. I thought a video might help you interpret my situation a little better, and it's divided into key sections. Firstly, explaining what CRM and mission crew training is. Number 2 is giving you my background and qualifications. Number 3 is the gap in the industry that I saw and wished to fill. And number 4, my course content and evidence. So firstly, what is CRM? CRM stands for Crew Resource Management. It is understanding human limitations when you're working by yourself, when you're working with others, and when you're working with machines. It looks at physiological and psychological barriers to effective performance. You're not at your best if you're sick, stressed, or fatigued, and you're not at your best if you have interpersonal problems within your teams. You can't make good decisions without good communication between team members, and you can't make good decisions if you're not able to detect, comprehend, and project information regarding your mission. It's called Crew Resource Management because it looked at how best to use every member of your crew, not just the pilots in the cockpit.
United is one of the world's biggest airlines. After Tenerife, the buzzwords around here became CLR, Cockpit Leadership Resource. Every airline now has its own such program, costing millions of dollars.
And a couple things that kind of facilitate.
Professors are telling pilots how to get along with each other and with the flight attendants, once seen as second-class citizens. The idea was greeted with some skepticism.
And then we finally got into the CLR concept a couple of years ago. For the pilots, you guys have been going through CLR since when?
And when I went through CLR, I thought it was the biggest bunch of hooey ever to come down the pike. I've since changed my mind on it. But there was one section where the 5 pilots got jumped on the other pilot and made a list of adjectives to describe this particular pilot once it was all over. And I had a list of about 25 adjectives to describe me that my compatriots had given me, and I took it home and showed it to my wife, and she went down the list and she said, "Oh yeah, oh yeah, that's you,
Yeah. And you said it is not, right?
And I said it is not.
Yeah.
And thinking about it, I said, well, gee, maybe it is.
Yeah.
There was a lot of resistance. There was a feeling that the few guys that really need it won't get anything out of it. And I think there was, although I think everybody, after having done it, felt that everybody could get something out of it.
The most I ever heard from a captain was coffee, cream, and sugar, type of thing, and that was your communication in the beginning. Now it's, you get communication of what the flight's going to be like, turbulence, the length of time. If you need any support or need any help, I'm there, to where you now feel like a group instead of the cockpit's here and the flight attendants are back here.
Looking back years ago, I think that door between the cockpit and cabin served more purposes than just to divide those two areas.
Yeah.
I
sort
feel,
of a psychological barrier, perhaps?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I don't feel that anymore.
Okay.
Release your seat!
This is a mock evacuation after an emergency landing. Pilots see firsthand the tough part of a flight attendant's job. Through training like this, airlines are trying to weed out the kind of behavior that kills. But no one can say for sure if this program saves lives. Meanwhile, pilot error remains the cause of 70% of all airline accidents, a figure that's rising. Aircraft manufacturers have tried to fix that problem by designing the pilot out of the cockpit. This is the first fully automated plane, flown by a computer.
Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no.
term later expanded to human factors, or HF, because often accidents occurred not just because of the crew, but because of other human issues, such as poor maintenance procedures, mistakes made by refuelers, poor interface design with automation. And so this also gave birth to a new term, non-technical skills, or NTS, because we are not only looking at just how a person operates a piece of machinery such as an aircraft, that is to say their technical flying skills, but also how that person interacts with others and demonstrates their cognitive and emotional intelligence, their non-technical skills, or NTS. So the terms can be considered linked and often interchangeable. CRM, Crew Resource Management, HF, Human Factors, NTS, Non-Technical Skills. The outcome of all of this is a better performance of individuals and teams. So why is it critical? It's critical because humans are placed in high-risk situations all the time and are expected to perform at their peak even when they may be under physical, physiological, or psychological stress. Now this includes such industries as aviation, firefighting, surgical teams, police, construction, or any environment where there is risk and uncertainty and people are required to work together. So what does the legislation require? Well, within aviation there is legislation regarding what levels of knowledge are required depending on your role within the industry. But there is no prescriptive method of training. CASA, Civil Aviation Safety Authority, leaves that up to industry to determine for itself and merely makes recommendations. In other words, it won't tell you how to do it, but it will tell you when you're doing it wrong. An example of this is the use of advisory circulars and publications known as ACs or CAAPs. They give you an example of one correct way of doing it, but not the only way. Now, they are guidelines, not prescribed regulations. The advisory publications refer to what's called the Manual of Standards, the MOS, and Part 61 of the MOS, which is legislation, describes the non-technical skills. It also describes the elements and performance criteria. And so it does give you a list of what's expected in the training, but not how to train. The end result is a bit of confusion as to what is actually required in order to train in this area. So the advisory circulars say that they need to be read in conjunction with the relevant regulations, which is the Manual of Standards. And the Manual of Standards tell you what needs to be trained, but not how to train it. So you go back to the advisory circulars and they give you some examples. And here are some frequently asked questions. So first of all, from the Civil Aviation Advisory publication, what is the difference between non-technical skills training and CRM? Well, basically they say that they're more or less interchangeable. And I've already explained that, so I won't go into too much detail there. The next one is how much time should you spend on non-technical skills training? So they're giving you some examples there, between 1 and 3 days, typically with a 2-day course as being the preferred option. And that's why my courses are 2 days long. Another question is outsourcing that training to an external provider and provides information and guidance on what skill level an outsourced provider would require, and that's what I am. I'm an outsourced external provider. And how long does the training remain current? Well, they recommend that you can either do a cyclical training session or once every 3 years, and that's what I base mine on, both cyclical and every 3 years. So now that we've seen what CRM training requires, let me tell you about my background and qualifications. Well, I joined the Army in 1990 flying Black Hawk and Chinook helicopters and held a number of command roles. CRM became very important in the Australian Army after the Black Hawk tragedy in 1996. And Army led the way in CRM development within the Australian Defence Force, and I was a part of that vanguard. I undertook training in aviation safety and particularly safety training. I became very well known within the Army for the quality and calibre of my CRM courses and was often asked to provide guest training roles in other courses. I was appointed the Regiment Aviation Safety Officer for the Army's Air Mobile Regiment, and I oversaw all CRM training within my unit. I left the full-time Army and transferred to the Army Reserve and flew for civilian organisations and trained others in aviation skills. And with some of my Army colleagues, we formed a company called Row Aviation, and that specialised in helicopter underwater escape training techniques, and we were trained by the world's leader in Hewitt simulation. I was both a Hewitt instructor and Rowe Aviation's CRM instructor, but later I left Rowe and concentrated on my own CRM course design under the name of IPAS, while Rowe concentrated on Hewitt and instructing air crewmen, those crew members who are not pilots. Both IPAS and Rowe continued to work together and supported each other in our various training roles. Now, while carrying out my aviation training consultancy, I still served in the Army in uniform, and I did a tour in Afghanistan with the Air Force as a drone pilot, and where one of my roles was to help develop a CRM course for drone operators. And later I became an instructor on small drones that were issued to Army units for their internal anti-drone training. So what did IPAS do with regards to CRM? Well, IPAS searched the world and looked at its different syllabi from the aviation organizations around the world, and I mashed them together to form the IPAS CRM HF syllabus, or Crew Resource Management Human Factor syllabus. This was then condensed into a training and workbook which forms the basis of my CRM HF course. So all the information I put into one book, and that book became the textbook / workbook for my course. So I use that syllabus, and it covers everything recommended in not only the Australian legislation, which is prescribed as well as suggested, but also all the content covered by the International Civil Aviation Organization, the American Federal Aviation Administration, the British Civil Aviation Administration, and the Joint Aviation Agency, which is the European version. All their syllabi are contained in my syllabi. But as I was training this, I noticed that there were some gaps within the industry that were not covered. And this is the third thing that I would like to talk about. The problem is that the legislation looks at predominantly airline industry, what they call regular public transport, and single pilot operations, and is weighted towards airplanes. I noted after flying in civilian roles that there was a subsection of the aviation industry that was not covered, and that was those tasks that required non-air crew trained personnel to perform tasks on board an aircraft and be part of the aviation team. I call them mission crew. They're not air crew, but they are part of the aviation team on board an aircraft. They perform a role, but are not formally trained. So I developed a mission crew course. It is a 2-day course developed in answer to a need by originally the New South Wales Rural Fire Service and then the New South Wales Department of Primary Industry, DPI. I also still do the standard CRM HF courses for such organisations as State Police Air Wings or the power line industry. So what I did was I reviewed all the relevant units of competencies that have skill sets that I can cover, and I integrate them as much as possible into my training. But the Working Safely Around Aircraft UOC forms the basis of the training now. This UOC is PUA FIR 209, Working Safely Around Aircraft. The DPI Mission Crew course is the most mature of all these and features heavily in the evidence that I have provided, which I will discuss later. After consultation with DPI, I have reworked the course to include some specific skills that their people need, particularly map reading and coordination with pilots. What I found with my Mission Crew course is that even though it gave a greater level of training than that required in the PUA FIR 209 unit of competency, because it wasn't accredited, and because a lot of organisations don't understand the requirements of training, I was getting some objection to my training. They didn't understand that what was prescribed in the UOC and what they thought they needed was actually exceeded in my training. I have now overcome this problem by partnering again with Rowe, and they have that UOC on their scope of training. I provide the training, and then these trainees provide the evidence, and then Rowe is able to then give the qualification as RPL. Now, this was only a recent addition as of last year. The process is now that I conduct a Mission Crew course with some specific scenarios for DPI, and I will change them upon request from them. So each trainee is assigned to a training course by DPI, and they contract me to run that course. I usually do 2 to 3 courses a year. I then issue a joining instruction to each member of the course, and that gives the trainees details on what is required before the course, during the course, and after the course. The trainee then does the pre-course study, which consists of watching an 18-minute video and then answering a quiz, which they have to submit to me. The quiz covers some of the content of the course and is designed to allay any fears of the unknown. No one is allowed to go flying until the quiz has been completed and submitted to me. The trainee then attends the training session, and I hold them all around the state. Day 1 consists of Commonwealth rules and regulations, organisational rules and regulations, aircraft safety, aerodynamics, various physical and psychological limitations, communication techniques, and then we discuss low flying and its hazards, including flying in a wire environment. We then finish off the day with flight planning and airborne navigation and risk management. On day 2, we go out and have a look at the helicopter landing site, and we do a survey and identify its hazards. When the pilot arrives and shuts down, he then conducts his briefing.
Respond fairly quickly. I'm going to call either mayday, mayday, or brace, brace, brace. Have you guys discussed brace positions? Okay. Depending on your seating position.
We then take time to do dry run rehearsals on the ground so that people can understand how to open and close the hatches, where the danger areas are, how to use the intercom, how to use the harnesses, etc. Then each team gets airborne and they conduct their airborne assessment and a navigation exercise. The pilot is then responsible for conducting the assessment and making sure that each team effectively does what they've been instructed to do the day before. When the teams return back to base, they complete the required work, fill out the required forms as per their organisational requirement, and that becomes the evidence for the RPL. They then provide feedback to me to IPAS for continuous improvement. After the course, I then look at all that feedback and I make it anonymous and then provide that back to DPI so they can ascertain what their people thought of the training. And then DPI provides me any feedback that they get from their people, and I adjust the course accordingly based on any new requirements. For example, they may see that they need their remote area shooters or airborne shooters have a greater need of training, and so then I will do more scenarios based on airborne shooting. In the evidence that I have provided, you will see the following. Various DPI and local land services courses I've conducted over the last 7 years and the number of trainees on each. Now this should satisfy the 50 students and 20 unit requirement and records of delivering over 100 hours of training. You'll also find feedback on my training and also the consolidated training returns which I provide to DPI and after I have made them anonymous. But I've also included the actual questionnaires which I now scan and keep. As an instructor with Rowe, they sent me a letter with after some courses I did with them as a subcontractor about 8 years ago, and I've included that as well. Now their senior instructor is more than happy to field any calls by Fortress Learning to discuss our training. I've also included details on my workbook, which as I said provides the basis for my CRM human factors content and also forms the basis of my presentations. And the workbook is available as a PDF for all trainees. Now some of my other learning resources include PowerPoint presentations which are derived and complements the workbook, several case studies of incidents and accidents which I have investigated myself in great depth and turned into presentations, relevant forms and documents which are derived from those of the contracted organisation, or contracting organisation I should say, and I use these so the trainees get used to their organisation's requirements. The pre-course quiz and the accompanying video it is based upon. Exercise Hopper, which is a unique in-course exercise to help the locust plague management people. And I've made a video which also explains how that exercise is done. There are 5 videos on aviation navigation for those who require some extra information on how to navigate from the air. And upon request from Army, I created some videos for internal Army use and their training on drone operations and the responsibilities of commanders who have small drones issued to their units, and I've included that as well. Now, as stated, the new mission crew course is based on the working safely around aircraft unit of competency, and that will facilitate the RPL by my training partner, Rowe Aviation. Also, currently, upon request from the power line industry in Queensland, both Rowe Aviation and IPAS are creating a combined mission crew and Hewitt course so that they can provide training to their people. So this is currently under development, and we expect progress on this once all COVID restrictions end and interstate travel recommences. Furthermore, DPI requested that specific content be incorporated into their course. Now, because locust plague management is a multi-state issue, New South Wales DPI asked if I could create a course with greater locust plague management content that covers a national response rather than a state-based response. So my learning program had to be changed and new content learned and a new presentation devised. Exercise hopper and a change in format was the end result. Finally, the last thing I've provided are my qualifications. And those are the ones that are relevant to this training. In particular, the following: my air transport pilot's license, my commercial pilot license, a diploma of aviation studies, military qualifications for all things safety, and my Hewitt qualifications. Hopefully that provides all the evidence that you require that will help in this diploma. Thank you very much for your assistance. I look forward to hearing from you.